but still. Just get into the game. Just finishing up this tweet. Bracket. Series. TEZ. Nailed it. In the top left on TS Gaming, it is the blue Zerg Solar. In the bottom right is the red Terran. It is GuMiho. GuMiho not looking so great versus Ragnarok in that TVZ, but maybe it was just a case of Ragnarok's style being particularly good against GuMiho. Maybe it's that they practice a ton together, and Ragnarok just knows exactly how GuMiho plays. Because even though we can kind of generally talk about and guess how GuMiho is going to play, to know the exact timings, to know the exact responses is still very different. But Solar, while he might not be Ragnarok and he might not play GuMiho that often, they will still play on ladder occasionally, he's looking really quite good. I mean, he did almost take down Cyril, granted that wasn't a ZVZ, but then he also took down Innovation in a TVZ that was a 2-1. I just saw the last game and went super late game, but while Innovation might be down 0-2, and here comes all the people saying, oh, he's in a slump, old Terran's bad, blah, blah, blah. I think Solar actually has been playing really well today. I talked about this in the last series about how Solar can sometimes be a little hit or miss. Like, is he either the really, really good Solar or is he the okay Solar? He's very rarely bad, but okay meaning he doesn't, get 5th or 6th in this group. Well, clearly he's doing okay. And I do think he's going to take this series overall. But GuMiho does still have some pretty cool TVZ, and it's very possible that whatever wasn't working against Ragnarok does find Solar off guard. I mean, the first 10 minutes of GuMiho's first TVZ versus Ragnarok was actually quite good. And it was on this map, too. It was just when the Nidus Room play started to come into effect that GuMiho started to really lose control over it. On that note, by the way, he was going for the Cyclone mech both games. A little less in the second game, that's because things happen, but that has been his ultimate goal, it seems. So I expect the same thing here. Reaper's gonna get a scout in the third base, but it really needs to get a scout in the main. We have a very fast lair on the way. That's like 240-ish. That is super fast. And we see a Roach Warren thrown down. It would have took a Nidus Worm. If not, it is possible we see a rather greedy Spire timing, which would work out very well against most Terran openers if you don't take damage from the Hellion pressure. But there's the drone for the Roach Warren. And I do expect a Nidus Worm then. So, job for Solar is to hide this, but already by revealing he doesn't have speed at around 330, that's already like, okay, that, maybe right now GuMiho is like, well, maybe it's finishing literally right now, but if he checks again and still sees no speed, he'll know about that fast lair. Although I guess he technically doesn't know there was gas taken. There's really not many gasless openers anymore for Zerg. The real question, of course, is he reading into this that much? Here's the second run by, seeing still no speed. It also should see the Nidus Worm and the Roach Warren. Unfortunately, with only 3 queens, only 2 on the front lines, it's really hard to stop the Hellions from getting in here and scouting and doing damage. And of course, lack of speedlings is another thing to worry about. So the 11 drones go down, the scout happens, bunkers being made, and while there are a couple of queens, a trio of queens put in that Nidus Worm, it's really not a ton, so this Banshee could still be very, very helpful. We don't have a lot of SimCity coming out in case we had a tank or something along those lines, but it's not tank-based defense. It's such an early Nidus Roach Warren that GuMiho could probably hold here with units that he has. He needs a Marauder to pop out, he needs that Banshee to pop out. Maybe because I didn't take out the Nidus Worm, actually, I should resend my statement. Maybe he can't hold. This Marauder in the bunker will be helpful, but we are losing 10 SCVs. Actually, no, I think he's okay. Yeah, here comes the Banshee. And close about to finish. We do not have an Overseer. So that should be good, but he lost more SCVs than I thought he would, so There's still a game after this. He's down to 18 workers. Sorry, Solar's on 18 workers. GuMiho about to be down to 18 workers. But he will clean up the army, and Solar's lost his queens and his army in doing this. So it's it's a trade. It is a trade. You don't really see the game going on from here, and it is going to be Solar who taps out. Decides it's not worth playing the long game. Losing his queens, he's gonna have to spend money, and as such, drones on spore crawlers. It is on him probably to decide if that game was workable. Every Terran player, even when they're down to 4 SCVs, if they're not being attacked anymore, is gonna say like, "Well, I got mules." The Zerg player can't really say the same thing. So it makes sense that he tapped out, even though maybe you could have forced you know, a 10-12 minute game, and we do go into game number 2. So GuMiho ended up holding. It was a little closer than I thought it was going to be. I guess the difference was, you know, not having a ton of Hellions back at home because he sacrificed them killing all those drones. It's so bad from Solar to lose that many workers. Is that much he can do? Once GuMiho started to be suspicious that there wasn't speed, it basically says, please run your Hellions past my queens. So, I guess you could argue he could have put the Roach Warren as part of the wall, but then he would have shown GuMiho even more that it was a Roach Warren that fast. It's a very risky build. You're kind of hoping that the Terran player assumes that they can't run in with the Hellions, and that their Hellions will be both not doing damage to your drone line as well as being out of position for your Nidus Worm. It just simply wasn't the case. It was a bit of a... I don't want to say a throwaway game, because that's not true, but it was a bit of a, like, I hope I get this easy free win, right? When you do a fast Nidus Worm like that. And it didn't happen, so maybe Solar going to go into the macro game here as we enter into year 0, a very macro-oriented map. In the top right, down 1, it is Solar. In the top left is the red Terran, it is GuMiho. No, I think you guys are ultimately wrong. And the only reason I say this as a fact is that Solar agrees. So it's that case where, like, pro gamers sometimes do exit games that they could win, that they have won in some cases, right? You know, injured games. And, you know, that does happen. I'm definitely on the side that Solar was eventually going to lose out. He lost, as I said, right? I already explained the queens were gone, so the Banshees kind of had a wide open area to work with. If you had to rebuild the queens off a very low drone count, that's already 450 minerals. And then you have to build 3 spore crawlers when you're down at only 18 drones. So you are investing 450, 150, 225, like 675 plus 3 drones. That's already so much more than what GuMiho really has to work with. GuMiho is going to drop mules, build a 3rd CC, set up a defensive situation, and keep tabs on Solar with Hellions. So he knows exactly what to do, and he can just kind of play his game. Solar's the one that has to react, and if you don't have units, then you're just going to die. Roaches would be very expensive to rebuild as well, since he can't rely on speedlings to take care of Hellion pressure. It just is it's a bad situation. Could Solar have, as I said, lasted a couple minutes longer? Maybe, but GuMiho would have ultimately come out ahead for sure. GuMiho had an advance in tech. Simply by being up to a starport, he was advanced in tech. And as Banglory mentioned, sometimes it really is maybe a mental thing where you just want to tap out of a game that is mostly lost. But I really think that Solar was on point with that tap out. I don't know if he was mentally thinking about all the situations that I'm now bringing up, but I can almost guarantee he's been in similar situations with that build where he has a certain amount of damage he thinks needs to be done. So, you know, in his mind, he should have killed all but 5 SCVs. He should have been able to camp production for longer. Or, of course, he should not have lost 11 drones or whatever it was to the Hellions, so he was already in a situation that he figured he just couldn't win from. And he was right. That is my final opinion. And Solar's as well. So on to the next game, and we are already into the next game as we have a different type of opener. Not just a simple, boring old 1-1-1 versus whatever Solar's doing. No, we have a second factory on 2 bases, which is scouted by an Overlord. Now, GuMiho, if he really wanted to keep this secret, he absolutely could have. Could have put the factory way over here. He could have had a Marine pop out from the barracks instead of just the Reaper, and maybe that would have been better, but I think he's okay with being scouted. To mention, it seems like it's kind of easy to stop this from being scouted. So it's more about the pressure you can apply with this and the reaction that Solar has to do to a build like this. Would it have been cooler if it's a surprise? Yes, everything's better in StarCraft II if it's a surprise, but it didn't seem like it was the first priority for Terran here. It is possible. GuMiho also just hope that Solar wouldn't scout. It's a bit of a bold decision. It's a bold guess. So Viking into Banshee, going to be providing a lot of pressure here. The second factory, not just an investment of more gas and minerals instead of a third CC, but also using it for production. It is a bit more committed, but Solar does have to react, has to take this seriously. Scouting's only one portion of StarCraft II, and already he is taking a little less than serious, and didn't have a lot of units prepared for those Hellions. Big mistake. Barracks lifted off because, well, it's very obvious he's going to go into mech from this. Third CC on location. Oh my god. That's bold. But because he's both getting Hellions and Roaches, and Cyclones, if Solar were to move across the map with either Lings or Roaches or both, he'd have to be very committed to cancel it. And at this point in time, Solar probably wasn't planning on being the attacker, so the third CC, not even scouted. If it even was, I don't think Solar could do much about it. Of course, if he gets like 10 Lings across the map without GuMiho seeing, he could absolutely cancel it, which is the worst feeling when you go back on the replays as Zerg players, just like, okay, this is stupid. They're stupid and I hate them. Third factory now on the way. Third CC, 75% done. Solar is going to go into a pretty fast Spire. Something that we saw Ragnarok try to do and was actually successful with it. It dealt damage, it bought time, it really forced GuMiho to play to Ragnarok style, so that's the same thing that Solar's going to be hoping for here, whilst defending against any Hellion Cyclones on the ground with his Roach-Ling combination. He is sacrificing upgrades to do this, that's the big takeaway here. Also maybe not as many drones as he could have had, later fourth base, sure, all that stuff, but this, oh no. Similar to Ragnarok, Solar put that Spire at the third base, and Scan goes down. GuMiho already was more well set up against this anyways, because he was already producing Cyclones, but now can also have missile turrets ready to go, so his Cyclones don't have to stay at home. And Mutas don't really do that well against Cyclones, unless the numbers are really quite severe. Oh my god, you guys still talking about that? Like, Chin is mix. I'm sorry, but he wasn't winning. You are wrong. Like, at this point, you just have to admit that everyone telling you is probably better at StarCraft, including Solar himself. Let's move on to this game, shall we? Big helmet attack with Cyclones. A little scary there, but looks like GuMiho not going to find the big takeaway he was looking for. If there was half as many Roaches, if the drones were not able to be pulled away, maybe the Devolution Chambers blocked him out, that could have been deadly. But it wasn't, so GuMiho not too sad about that. At least he saved the Cyclones, and Hellions are going to be the easiest thing to produce, especially because he had his third CC on location. I can't really explain just how much better it feels to have your command center on location. Just play a couple Terran games and try and do it yourself, and you'll see how much of a difference it makes. But he does have to be scared about this counterattack, because the Cyclones are a little apart from each other. He even loses one right off the bat. They're very vulnerable units. We're supposed to have those Hellions on the front line. They're supposed to be able to kite like this, so already losing one is a rather big deal. But the Banshee comes back home after doing not very much at the main base and will be able to help save the day. SCVs unfortunately had to be pulled into this because the Cyclones were out of position, because the Banshee's out of position. 13 SCVs go down, 2 Cyclones in total, looking for that third. Barely doesn't grab it. Oh my god. A decent run by with only Roaches. Now let's see where the Mutas are coming in. They're not going to be coming in at all. Looks like since Solar was scanned, he decided to cancel it. Did GuMiho see that canceled Spire? He did, so he knows he has to worry about it. Did he already commit to missile turrets? He did. A little unfortunate there, but very slight differences, blow to blow. Total workers lost. See that Solar's kind of making up for some of these earlier drone losses. But triple CC, 13 CDs really isn't that bad. GuMiho's still at 63 and even has the upgrade lead here. He's that +2 armor now. Solar already has his Hive. Needs to be a little careful against now what is Blue Flame Millions, but he's got his Hive, he's got some creep spread, not a lot, and that's something that GuMiho is going to look to abuse as the game goes on. But Solar is setting his Overlords across. No, he's actually Roaches. He's sending his Roaches to scout for him, which I think is very important and just a very good idea if you've already fallen behind in this regard, the creep spread regard. 4CC is on the way. More production here. Second Armory. GuMiho doing very similar builds. Well, he started off with 2 factories, so I can't say that, but he's doing very similar composition, very similar mid-game. If this game goes on for a really long time, which it might, Year Zero is a long map, typically creates more of those 15, 16-minute games, then we might see additional starports, more Liberators. But that's going to be a little ways off. Solar has a lot of Cyclone Hellion attacks to worry about before he has to worry about Liberators. Oh, that's right. GuMiho goes for the Hellbats now, I suppose. That's just now going to be his thing, his addition to this matchup. And maybe if the game goes really long, maybe then we'll see Liberators. But first and foremost, getting the medevac count up. Is Solar going to be prepared for this like Ragnarok was? I'm still not sure if parasitic bombs were really the best thing to do over like more abducts. But that was Ragnarok's choice, and he did win that game. So we'll see if Solar has similar thinkings. Is he even going to prepare to throw down the parasitic bomb? He's probably thinking about all these abducts he's going to get down, and then he's going to have medevacs drop on top of them. I don't know how new this style is comparative to like the Korean ladder, but we're about to find out. Vipers are rather full on that energy. They are going for the abducts, not the parasitic bombs. GuMiho actually being very careful with his medevacs. As Solar runs away, he doesn't want to have inefficient medevac drops. Now his boost is on cooldown though, which is a little awkward. We have no parasitic bombs whatsoever, so it was just a Ragnarok thing. Blinding Cloud's always a little bit awkward in this situation, but sometimes can be helpful. If Solar retreats, he's going to guarantee lose a ton of units. The lock-ons as well as the Hellbat drops. He does focus fire down the medevacs to his credit, but this is where Cyclones really get the cost efficiency here, is when the Zerg army is retreating, especially if they aren't retreating on creep. Solar takes a pretty bad fight to start things off, is now retreating back to try and remax, but he didn't really have that big of a bank before he tried to poke the bear there. And that could be what kills him. Some of the Vipers did live, 3 of them. I think all of them did. And they are gaining energy again. GuMiho knows how careful he has to be on that creep. He also has he's lost his medevac drops. So if he wants to take another good fight like that, he's going to have to reposition himself, load up his Hellbats once again, but he's the one that's going to retreat now. Very, very cautious. These Banshees going to add in a decent amount of DPS, by the way, since they're not going to be the main target of Solar. You really want to get rid of these Cyclones more so. And he is abducting the Cyclones over and over again. Good focus around the medevacs again. Solar, it's a different type of engagement than what Ragnarok was showing us, but it's still finding its effectiveness. And, ooh, just like Ragnarok, we have a Nidus Storm finally. More Roaches to replace. Solar's still on 4 bases against GuMiho's 4 bases, and GuMiho's adding on more command centers. So if GuMiho can control the map like this, then I think he is ultimately in the better position. That's exactly what I said about Ragnarok. And then Ragnarok Nidus Stormed and completely flipped the script. Just started getting on GuMiho's side of the map and started really digging into his economy. So is that going to be the same situation here? Because that's definitely what Solar needs to do. Right now, he's maxed out his okay upgrades. That feels okay. Ultimately, with the creep spread, with the lack of 5th base, I'm a little more worried for Zerg. So he does need to get that Nidus Worm down and do something. No cancel there. 300 minerals lost. Nidus Worm is seen by GuMiho as he sends whatever he can back. Unfortunately, it's only... There we go. Some Cyclones come forward. But a little bit late. Let's see if there's going to be a lot of units popping out from there. There are. No transfuses, of course, but still so many units pop out. And GuMiho has sent his entire army back. He's going to regret that because Solar is moving towards his third base, it looks like, or maybe towards the fourth. There is a planetary, and GuMiho realizes his mistake, tries to get back into position, but he's already lost so much kiting availability for those Cyclones. They're also being abducted once again. Now the energy is out of the Vipers, and maybe GuMiho can still hold with the amount of kiting he can do here to his third, to his natural. Gets the Overseer, but unfortunately, there's no Cloak on the Banshees anyways. He's got to get rid of these Hydras, these Roaches, but how much of an army does he have left over? He dipped down so far, having to react to that Nidus Storm. He's forced to pull the SCV, something that he can do. Here come the Blue Flame Hellbats as well against what was a lot of Hydras, so they are rather effective, but not effective enough. Didn't even drop those last two. There we go. But this is looking quite desperate. Solar with a single Nidus Worm has just, it's the same thing, but even worse, actually. GuMiho dealt with this even worse than he did against Ragnarok. Now down 70 supply, and while this type of mech does rebuild a little bit faster than tank mech, it's more inefficient in those lower supplies than tank mech. A couple of tanks on the high ground, boom, you hold against 100 supply sometimes, but 3 Cyclones on the high ground, that's not going to do shit. This game looks like it's going to be over. Nidus Worm, once again, being the worst thing that Cyclone players have to deal with today. Now going to the natural base. At least the production isn't camped, which is why we don't see GuMiho tapping out. And he has so many extra bases, but no, this game's over. Hellbat drops. Decent split against them. Here come the Vipers. They're gaining energy back at home. Nidus Worm for reinforcements. That's a... it's almost like a PM Nidus Worm. GG. Solar takes game number 2. It's just, it's the same thing there. I've never been a fan of Cyclone mech, to be totally honest with y'all. You know, any newcomers are here and you're like, who's this chick? I'm not a fan of Cyclones, that's who I am. But it's been this developing style. You know, we kind of first saw its popularity, its effectiveness in the qualifiers for IEM in January. And I say effectiveness, they really didn't win that often. But we saw it's starting to mold here. And we saw some Terran players start to mold it into something that was really abusable. And it was working occasionally. Then in WCS, it seemed to work a little bit better. You continue to see the developments, the improvements on it. Some faster Liberator transitions. In this case, GuMiho adding on the medevac drops. It's something that these Terran players seem to really want to make work, especially GuMiho, who has experimented with Cyclones even before this year. Even like mid-2018, he kind of showed them every now and again. But it's just still, it was already looking kind of weak against people who could really get some decent creep spread, who get a decent number of Vipers. Fungals also can be complicated for the Cyclones. But now you have this new addition of the Nidus Worm, and we have 2 games where one Nidus Worm, or 2, but still, the Nidus Worm ends up just killing the Terran player. Is it different if GuMiho sees the Nidus Worm and kills it? Yeah, absolutely. But that's such a huge job for the Terran player, who's already, it's a very APM intensive style. Maybe not as much as Bio, but definitely more than the tank mech we've seen. So you're already on the map trying to do a billion things, trying to expand constantly as well, and making sure you're not getting run by and whatnot. And then on top of that, you're supposed to defend your bases, plural. Even the planetaries are going to be under fire with Nidus Worms and how fast they unload. That's tough, man. GuMiho is going to have to maybe adapt to some of these common Nidus Worm timings in the macro games and maybe start building a couple of tanks to set around his bases. Maybe that's what happens as we see this develop, but right now it seems to be GuMiho's weakness, and if the game goes similar to last, I can guarantee Solar will be even more eager to get to that Nidus Worm. It's the Ace of match, and these guys are still in the group, regardless of their losses, but it gets harder and harder as they take more and more series lost. In the bottom right, as the blue Zerg, it is Solar. In the top left, as the red Terran, it is GuMiho. Keep a single Cyclone on patrol on your main and Nidus does nothing. That's not really necessarily all that true. Like, Ragnarok did one Nidus Worm, it was caught, it got killed. His second Nidus Worm was pretty effective, but eventually got cleaned up. Then his third and fourth Nidus Worm were actually shut down by tanks, but then he just kept putting Nidus Worms around the map. Because you don't have to put them in the main base. let's say that this is GuMiho's 4th base. You just put it over here, and that's still an accessible transport. That's still bopping the planetary and then retreating before they can react. It's still a problem. But yes, it would help if GuMiho didn't have to run all the way back home and didn't get his production camped. Solar cancel Spire. GuMiho's preparing for Muta's tanks way too late. Nope, that was not the problem of last game. Nope. If perhaps you're new to the Cyclone meta, you might think that that's the problem there, but it wasn't. He spent 300 minerals on missile turrets, and that was his reaction to the Spire. Because that's all you need when you go for Cyclone mech. Cyclones are fine against Mutas. Again, unless it's an absurd number. Solar was hoping to find GuMiho building defensive tanks, thinking that maybe Solar could be aggressive with roaches, as he did versus Ragnarok. And that's where the Spire can be effective. Or if the Cyclones are out of position, then maybe the Mutas can still control the game. But no, GuMiho wasn't off because he was preparing against the Spire. He dealt with it very, very appropriately, and then also rescouted that it wasn't even on the way. GuMiho did this last time we were on Kairos Junction. If an Overlord is placed on this little... Well, you know what? I was on Port Alexander, actually. But the point is, he's done this before. And if the Overlord's placed in the typical Overlord spot, then a Marine could kill it, if he so desired to make it. Just the Reaper, though. Gonna swap off. Starport was not scouted last time he put it all the way to the top side. This time, Solar's Overlord is in the easiest position that can be to scout it. And since GuMiho has been doing a lot of speed Banshee firsts, I wouldn't be surprised if Solar just totally anticipated it. Not that you really do anything different against speed versus Cloak Banshee. You still get Spore Crawlers and Queens. Interesting so far. Solar is going to have to dive into the main base. He's going to dive into the main base. Okay, there's a real possibility there's an armory over here, so that Overlord should be looking to go a little deeper before it dies. He's gonna head over not to an armory position, but rather to try and see what's going on in the front, but because he didn't realize that Overlord only went to the top side. He didn't know it was a wall off in the natural. He doesn't see anything. A little concerning, but since he's seen the Hellions, you know what's pumping out of those factories and what's out of the barracks. So it's primarily you're scouting for the starport technology and the potential armory anyways. And maybe a third TC timing too. He was a little late. Or rather, he was a little early to scouting that. Roach Warren is on the way. Solar, every Zerg's gonna expect GuMiho to play mech. Lair is a little fast. Actually, no. Oh, you know, it's like, I think it's like a 4-minute lair. Never mind. It's a totally normal macro game. Liberator, nope. Viking is trying to get a couple more Overlord kills before it's useless, but there is a Liberator on the way, and then we'll see the Cloak or Banshee with speed, perhaps. He's doing that build with the Marines and the tank. Nah, he's not going to move out against the Solar. It didn't really work against Ragnarok anyways, but if you do force a, you know, even 7 roaches, it is taken away from their drone count. It's a very risky build to do. So keeping the tanks back at home, this is going to help defensively against anyone trying to catch you on a low Cyclone count. You know, do too many just right into Cyclone opener, suddenly you get Roach Ravager all in, and your Cyclones really don't do well in the early game. So swapping over to some tanks, and that will set him up nice defensively. Now if Solar were to go for Spire this game and hide it appropriately as well, that's when GuMiho is a little lacking in the anti-air, but that's not what's happening here. Liberator does get siege up to get a couple of drones. Really wants to pull that army out of position, but Solar is not going to fall for it. And he's totally prepared for these Hellions. 7 roaches are on the way. And he didn't even make some Ravagers. This extra range, I guess, is going to help deal with the Hellions even a little bit more. Lang maybe actually was able to click on that factory. But he should know it's a factory. Yeah, even if he didn't click on it. Infestation Pit already on the way. Once you get up to that hive nice and quick. Has to be careful about some weirder GuMiho timings, even with tanks. But GuMiho is just trying to get his third base set up. There's a transfer over into Cyclones. There are some roaches making their way across the map. Lings too, but the tanks really stop this from looking effective. Again, if there was like only 3 or 4 Cyclones, maybe this can do something. But then we also have Banshees. Not plural, we have Banshee. Looking to be the anti-roach defense. And sometimes one Banshee really is worth it in that regard. Oh, I expected a fast high for the infestation pit, but Solar is going to change things up. Personally, I don't really like Swarm Host against Cyclone Mech, but it has worked or almost worked in the past, so it is an option you have as a Zerg player against this. You just have to be extra careful because it's a more mobile mech composition, so if you pop all your Locusts at once and then they get caught by the Cyclones, well, you're going to be in a little bit of trouble. I do expect a hive still, you know, maybe in 9-minute, 10-minute hive. 4th base, forward position. Kind of interesting. Upgrades on the way. He's getting a decent number of Swarm Hosts, going up to 14. And he will be able to control the game from here on out if everything goes according to plan. GuMiho not really on the map quite yet, doesn't have that big of an army. But his Hellions are looking to get some serious damage done. They don't have Blue Flame yet, but 5 of them could be a big problem. He even pops a Locust to try and take care of it, but still 4 of them left alive. And this could be a ton of damage. Solar was totally prepared to jump on top of unsieged tanks. Jump in through the natural, perhaps. It actually wasn't a ton of damage. That could have been so much worse. Only 5 drones go down. And he does get a Locust Wave off, but he doesn't really get to control it. So they just run on top of those, drop on top of those, whatever you want to call it. Fly on top of those? Yeah. On top of those Hellbats, which is very ideal for GuMiho. I don't know why the Queens were so far forward. That seemed like a mistake. He's replacing those as well. GuMiho is going to have to bide his time here. But once he gets up to like more of like a 170 supply, then he can maybe try and be aggressive with these Cyclones. Also adding on Liberators already to be used for harassment, but also to help cement his 3rd base, even 4th base. Since there's nothing here in this army that shoots up. Well, Ravager Crucibles, I suppose. Here come the Hellbats. The Blue Flame is done, but this time Solar's trying to target fire on top of the Cyclones. He grabs 1 and does grab 2. Grabs the tank as well. The Roaches barreling through here. GuMiho was just broken. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. He just got broken. There's still some Locust waves ready to go, too, in case the Roach Ravager can't cut it. Queens were on the front lines, I guess, to deal with the Banshee. This was very intentional. And this was the most effective I've seen a Swarm Host be, for sure. It made it look really, really easy. Everybody's not taken out by those Crucibles. And that is a dominant army supply for Solar. GuMiho unable to take the TVZs today. He's falling farther and farther down in the group alongside Innovation, who has yet to take a series win, I believe. So much for the Terrans. Group D is their last hope. GuMiho doesn't want to give up, I guess. It is kind of one of those series where if you lose it, you're basically out. You're really hoping for a couple of your opponents to do super poorly. So it's not like a bracket where you're just, you know you're out once you lose this. It is kind of close to that. GG. Solar takes game number 3, damn it, for the 2-1. We've done that like a billion times on this broadcast.